Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for everyone. Thank you for المخا for this great opportunity. This is my first public appearance, and I would like to thank Atik and his team for putting all this event together, and would like to thank all the participants for their input and for their presentations. So Hisham al-Makdashi, and I am an officer who served 12 years in the Yemeni military. Unfortunately, during the conflict, and also I served in the position of a deputy defense attaché in DC at the Yemeni embassy for the past 5 years. Have had its benefits. Working in DC has been a privilege and has been a good opportunity to learn and educate every day, and also it's been an eye-opening experience for me. And from that experience, I would like to share a little bit of what I have learned of how the US is looking into the world, the region, and specifically Yemen. I put a small presentation that would show, or at least interpret my speech here, or my input, and I would like to share that with you. If you don't mind, give me a minute. So as a start, this is obviously the first slide, and this is how the subject has started. This is the scope, or this is the angles that I'll be talking about. The historical partnership between Yemen and the US, the US military theater, and also how does the US look into Yemen, and where do they stand today, and how the strategy of the US need to be considered when looking into Yemen. So, quick historical angle. The US have had a huge turning point in terms of security conflict in Yemen. One of them, the main ones, were when the conflict started in 1986 between northern and south Yemen. We call it in Yemen أحداث الجبهة, but that was the first intervention of US material and US weapons into the Yemeni forces' hands as a support or as an extension of the Cold War at the time. People would not notice that, but the Saudis have had so much into that calculation or equation at the time. So you could have seen how the Saudis were supporting the Yemeni army or opening doors for the Yemeni foreign policy to engage more with the US and the capitalist camp against the Soviet Union. So that was the first turning point. The second turning point when Al-Qaeda, or was an extremist people who just came back from Afghanistan fighting the Soviet Union, which is still an extension of the Cold War. They attacked the USS Cole in Aden in 1999. That increased and opened the doors for the Sana'a and DC to engage more in a bilateral partnership and a security enhanced partnership as well. So as a result, Ali Abdullah Saleh started his special forces, his elite forces at the time, and started fighting Al-Qaeda, and that was post 9/11 as well. So we're talking about 1986 as a turning point, 1999 as a turning point, and then 2001, 9/11 as a turning point. One thing to consider is that when the conflict in 2014 happened, that was not a turning point for Yemen specifically. That was a turning point for the whole region, and I'm talking here about Yemen and a bilateral relationship. So the US have a view or a framework of looking into the world. If you could see in the left here, this is a small map of the global theater of the US, and that's in each color you can see which command or which combatant command the US designates to rule this area. Whereas very interesting here is that we're looking at the yellow part of the map, and this is where it's in the right here in the green map. Egypt is part of the CENTCOM. It's not part of AFRICOM, which is something interesting. Historically, Israel was part of EUCOM. Trump came and he decided that it is the main or the normal place for Israel is part of their neighbors' countries, which they don't necessarily agree with, but it became in 2020 part of this US CENTCOM. That means that there is a person who sits in Tampa, Florida, that have a responsibility all over these countries in terms of military. And the reason for me sharing this map with you is that I have to tell you why I usually refer to Yemen here in this context as playing in the Champions League. You could see that Afghanistan and Iraq are in this combatant command or in this area of responsibility. This has been a heated theater for operations for the US for the past 20 years, since 2001, since post 9/11. So this is one. Two, Israel is there, one of the greatest allies of the US in the world. Saudi Arabia as well, UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, all the countries that the US have looked at as partners, main partners in the region, they share the same table with Yemen. So when there is something happening in the region, Yemen is not the priority, just to be clear. There is so much calculation in this. There's so much things that would put into equation before getting a decision made. So, and that's why I would like to share this with you. That's the main thing I share this with you, because with all this calculation, the Houthis are trying to impose the main threat to the international trade and to the international maritime security, and that also brings Yemen up to the level of the priorities. Like, where is Yemen standing now? It's number one in the CENTCOM area, but still, Lebanon is still number one. Syria is area of interest for the US because of the Russian intervention and the Turkish intervention as well. So that's why we don't, in the past 10 years, since the conflict started in Yemen, we haven't seen a rigid or a serious intervention or a serious position for the US in terms of security and military threats that the Houthis have been imposed. It's more of a political approach, diplomatic approach. The US does not want to engage in Yemen in a very rough way. I mean, you have seen the elections in 2020, where President Biden was saying that we would end the war in Yemen and all that, like beautiful talk, but eventually the US now is fighting in Yemen. So what happened, what changed, is that the realities, as I mentioned, there is so much things that are blurring the vision for the US policymakers in DC, that and tells them that Yemen is not an important place within the whole region. And the conflict in Yemen always shows that the opposite. That I have witnessed that whenever they say that, okay, Yemen is a second priority thing, we have to discuss it later, it comes like in the 7th of October, when the conflict started in Gaza, and Yemen was forgotten for a while. And then the Houthis were able to bring that conflict or that part of the region up to the top tier. So they participated in the Gaza conflict. They participated in the conflict in there. They launched drones. They started erupting the theater, the international maritime security. So this is why I always say that Yemen has been forgotten, but still Yemen is still, as a conflict, still proves itself to be one of the main influential conflicts in the region. Has a geographical location that you cannot change, and has a history of military equipment and weapon purchases and weapon smuggling have a huge impact onto the border security of the countries around it. So eventually, yes, it is important, but the US don't look into it as an important conflict. I know it doesn't make any sense, but this is how the US looks into the region. Where the US strategy stands today, if you have noticed that the US started an aerial operation for attacking the Houthis' capabilities and degrading their capabilities on continuing attacking the Red Sea, and also the attacking their allies in the region, and that includes Israel. Yes, the US does not want to be involved in a conflict in Yemen, does not want to be dragged into a land operation. The Houthis understand and the Iranians understand this, that America has already been engaged in Ukraine and now in Gaza and in Palestine. And also they have a strategic adversary, which is China. So they don't want to get dragged into a conflict, another conflict in the area like Iraq and Afghanistan for another 20, 30 years. So they continue to support their allies. They continue to enhance the partners' capabilities. They continue to have a presence in the Red Sea and the Arab Sea and the Mediterranean. They continue to deter the Houthis' capabilities. But with all the promises that the Biden administration have said during this conflict, that they will end the war in Yemen, they don't want to be the one that started the war in Yemen. So I would be very impressed to see this administration for the past couple of weeks that they still have engaging in a conflict in Yemen or a land operation or whatever something promising for us as a Yemenis would happen. I don't see it coming. In the right picture, you can see the Secretary of Defense with his partners and officials and of the Saudi government, and that picture was brought here because I would like to emphasize on the partnership between Saudi and America. The Saudis are the door for the Americans in the region, not the Israelis, not the Emiratis, not the Qataris. They share so much history. They share so much common interest and common threats. So whatever is floating in the air here now, that the Saudis are getting away from the Americans, they're starting to open doors with Russians and Chinese. Yes, it's a very strategic move, but they would never in the next 20, 30 years abandon the Americans. The Americans are a very greatest ally for the Saudis, and the Saudis, they are the pivot country in the region. They cannot just dismantle that position and leave. With all that said, I told you I would try to make it sharp and clear, and if you have any questions or concerns or inquiries, just let me know now, or you can shoot me an email. I'll put my details and questions and contact information on the last slide. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for listening, and thanks المخا again, and I hope to participate again in the next event. Thank you so much.